Good day to everyone, both here and those joining us virtually. My name is Irene Jarosevich. I am the World Federation of Ukrainian Women's Organizations main representative to the United Nations Department of Global Communications Civil Society Unit, as well as the moderator for today's event, CRSV Alert, Global Rise in Sexual Violence in Conflict Situations. Allow me to begin with a greeting from our president, Yaroslava Kharkiani, who is joining us virtually from Hungary. Dobrý den, paní Jaroslavo. The World Federation of Ukrainian Women's Organization was established 75 years ago this past November and has long been participating in the CSW. The Federation is deeply committed to supporting Ukrainian women, strives to help remedy the multiple problems and burdens created by the sustained Russian aggression, strives to minimize women's vulnerability at this time of conflict, and to maximize women's capability, and for working towards a strong role in rebuilding a post-war Ukraine. My deep thanks from President Kharkiani to everybody who is joining us today. And with us today from the World Federation is Mariana Zajic, Vice President. The Federation is also grateful that UN Women stands in solidarity with women and girls in Ukraine. The UN Women Country Office works with the government of Ukraine and with women's civil society organizations to address the crime of conflict-related sexual violence. And indeed, we are pleased to have with us today Rafi Canisto, the Chief Peace Security Officer at UN Women. And there you are. Please come on here.
Thank you, Madam Moderator, and thank you for the invitation. It's such an honor to be in this distinguished company here. And I wanted to thank the organizers and co-sponsors of this event warmly. I'm especially grateful to the distinguished representatives from the Ukrainian government and Ukrainian civil society who have taken a long journey to join us today. It's an honor to share this platform with you. Gender equality is one of the most important root causes of conflict-related sexual violence. Therefore, efforts towards eliminating this inequality are essential to the prevention of conflict-related sexual violence. I commend the Ukrainian government to continue prioritizing gender equality and women's rights despite the war and an extremely challenging environment. This includes assuming the presidency of the UN Women's Executive Board in 2023, for which we are deeply grateful that Ukraine was leading UN Women's work there. The signature of a framework cooperation on the prevention and response to the conflict-related sexual violence with the UN is another testimony of this commitment. Alongside other UN agencies, and of course, especially the Special Representative on Sexual Violence, Pramila Patten, UN Women contributed to the development of the implementation plan of a framework which aims to provide quality multi-sectoral support to survivors of conflict-related sexual violence, including access to necessary services, justice, and reparations. Building on the framework of cooperation, UN Women is collaborating with 5 other UN agencies in a joint program funded by the Conflict-Related Sexual Violence Multi-Partner Trust Fund, focused on strengthening national and community-based prevention of violence and response mechanisms in Ukraine through a survivor-centered multi-sectoral approach. UN Women also supports efforts towards providing reparations for conflict-related sexual violence survivors in Ukraine in our role as a co-chair of sub-working group on reparation in the context of the implementation plan of the framework of cooperation. Our office in Ukraine is also contributing to discussions around draft legislation on reparations. We are convinced that the restoration of the rights of survivors is essential to sustainable peace, and we will continue to support Ukraine to develop survivor-centered reparation mechanisms. Let me finish by reiterating that UN Women stands in solidarity with Ukraine's women and girls. We remain committed to working with the Ukrainian government and women's civil society organizations, as well as with the UN family, and of course noting that Dr. Pramila Patten is really leading this work in the UN system on conflict-related sexual violence. So we work with the UN family to address conflict-related sexual violence to ensure women's and girls' full enjoyment of their rights. Thank you very much for your attention, and thank you for inviting us to be here. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Now it is my distinct honor to introduce the head of the Ukrainian delegation to CSW 68, Olha Stefanishina, Ukraine's Vice Minister for European and Euro-Atlantic Integration, from whom we will hear by video from Ukraine.
Colleagues, guests, and participants, it is my honor to speak at this event tonight. This month, we pay tribute to all Ukrainians suffered from the Russian aggression. Those crimes are being used as the weapon against our people, with unchanging patterns of genocide and unprecedented brutality. The recent report of the UN Independent International Commission of Inquiry on Ukraine unfortunately confirmed evidence of a widespread sexualized torture and other forms of sexual and gender-based violence. Russians demonstrated profound disregard to the life and dignity of every Ukrainian who have fallen the victim or survivor of this aggression. This brutality is not confined to women and girls. It takes many forms affecting everyone regardless gender or status. Many Ukrainian male civilians reported are being tortured. The Commission of Inquiry has also confirmed the patterns of reproductive violence deliberately used by the Russian armed forces, just like in the Middle Centuries. Intentional rapes of the pregnant woman are often accompanied by torture and the result of miscarriages. Mistreatment and harm caused to Ukrainian prisoners of war are often aimed at destroying their reproductive capacity. It is also crucial to highlight the harrowing Russian crimes to the temporarily occupied territory of Ukraine. We can only imagine, based on already established facts, what is really happening there with every single day of occupation that continues. Russian regime is all about the pressure, torture, and indoctrination. There is no room for voluntary consent when it comes to circumstances of coercion. Therefore, I would like to use this opportunity to call on the international community not to remain silent, not to count the days of the war, but count the days until the justice prevails. The access of international mission at the temporarily occupied territories is vital. Provision of all the necessary military support to Ukraine, enabling us to deoccupy the territories and set people free from massive torture, rapes, and pressure they are living in, is vital. While we have access to those survivors we can access to, we developed a mechanism to support our citizens. 11 survivor relief centers were opened across the country, hotlines and online platforms created and enforced. Together with the Global Survivors Fund, we launched the pilot interim reparation projects, which is our first crucial step to give the victims the moral and mental compensation for the crimes. These reparations are interim. They establish the fact that the survivor has been subjected to a physical or sexual violence, and this is the full reparation which will be paid by the Russian Federation. At the same time, those who may still be afraid to ask for help should see that their state supports them. We developed a number of legislative initiatives strengthening the protection of the survivors, victims' families, and children born as a result of these crimes. It will be put to vote in the parliament soon. We hope for the support of the international community in this matter. Unfortunately, this experience led us to putting the strategies and policies in place. We want the whole world to learn from it, although under such unfortunate circumstances. I also urge to use the Russian frozen assets. Among other instruments, the support of those who have experienced violence deserve that Russia pay and acknowledge thus the crimes committed. It would also send a powerful symbolic message, demonstrate a global solidarity in holding perpetrators accountable and supporting the victims in their journey towards healing, recovery, and justice. Neither can we overlook the appalling acts of deportation. Only this February, the UN Committee on the Rights of the Child urged Russia to immediately stop the forced transfer of children from the occupied Ukrainian territories. The UN's findings underscore the severity of the situation. Over 19,500 Ukrainian children have been interrogated, detained, and forcibly deported from their homes in Ukraine to Russia. And this is only the official calculation that we have at our disposal. Children were deliberately separated from their parents, abducted from orphanages, to be then placed for adoption in Russia. Can you only imagine this happening in the 21st century in the heart of Europe? We all know the tools of the Russian aggression were supposed to break the Ukrainian will. These are acts of violence that violate not only the humanitarian law, the international treaties, the rules-based order, it's the crimes, and it's the barbarian crimes. Therefore, we call on all partners to rest more pressure on Russia so that every Ukrainian child, every woman, and every man illegally deported to the territory of Russia is returned home. We should take all necessary steps to save Ukrainians and make everything possible and impossible to bring Russia to justice. For those crimes the whole world have seen and will not be able to unsee. We must act for justice, for reparations, for support of survivors, ensuring their voices are heard and their rights are protected.
Thank you. And whenever we view a video from Ukraine, we must always remember that the context in which it is being filmed. This one was filmed in Kyiv, Ukraine's capital city, a city that is the object of relentless Russian military aggression, endless air raid sirens. Irina Borovets, Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs of Ukraine, is also no stranger to Russia's relentless missile strikes, the endless air raid silence. And in response to these pressures, she is emblematic both of the determination of the nation of Ukraine, as well as of the woman of Ukraine, to confront with resolve and overcome the challenge. Deputy Minister, please.
Good morning. I didn't expect to be the first one after Olga, but thank you very much. I guess I'm a very important person, yeah. Yes, esteemed guests, dear colleagues, fellow Ukrainians. Opening a discussion on the global rise in sexual violence and conflict situation is indeed a significant and sensitive topic. Such a discussion requires focusing not only on the grim reality of such violence, but also on the resilience of survivors and the efforts being made to combat it. Sexual violence and conflict is not just a consequence of war. It is a weapon, a deliberate tool employed to terrorize and to dismantle the very fabric of communities. Just like in my country, Ukraine, Russian invaders employ sexual violence to devastate individuals and communities, creating widespread psychological trauma and a sense of vulnerability. This commitment to helping survivors and the pursuit of justice remains strong among Ukrainians and our international allies. The international community supports amplify this resolve, emphasizing the global commitment to justice and the unwavering pursuit of holding Russian aggression accountable for their war crimes. Since the start of Russia's full-scale military aggression, Ukrainian prosecutors have documented in the territories liberated from the aggressor's troop 274 cases of conflict-related sexual violence, including 97 men, 177 women, among them 13 minors, 12 girls and a boy. This encompasses a range of abuses such as rape, violence against genitals, forced nudity, threats and attempts of rape, and being forced to witness sexual abuse of a family member, among others. On the liberated territories, prosecutors recorded crimes of the Russian military, rape and torture, as well as gender-based violence, specifically against mothers, wives, and sisters of Ukrainian servicemen. Sexual violence is an awful crime that transcends borders, affecting societies worldwide and leaving scars on survivors and their families. Ukraine remains unwavering in its commitment to replacing impunity with justice and turning indifference into action, with survivors' experience, needs, and demands at the core of our efforts. We firmly believe that robust cooperation between governments, multilateral partners, civil society, and survivors is the crucial prerequisite for ending the cycle of impunity. In pursuit of this goal, we remain dedicated to working closely with all stakeholders, including our role as a chair for this year within the International Alliance on Preventing Sexual Violence and Conflict initiative launched by the United Kingdom. Today, I would also like to address Ukrainian diaspora. Your role in this battle cannot be overstated. You are the voice of Ukrainian across the globe, advocating for our cause, sharing our stories, and rallying international support. Your efforts are a beacon of hope for those who suffer and a reminder that they are not alone. Being far from Ukraine, you remain strongly connected with us spiritually. You play an important role in countering the Russian disinformation and lies, especially in the information field, as well as by collecting and providing humanitarian aid. Let us pool our resources, knowledges, and resolve to create robust mechanisms, not only to seek to punish the perpetrators, but also to prevent these atrocities from occurring in the first place. Prevention, protection, prosecution, and partnership must be the pillars of our strategy. In conclusion, let this side event be more than discussion. Let it be a catalyst for change, a turning point in our collective endeavor to safeguard human dignity and rights. Together, let us send a clear message: sexual violence and conflict will not be tolerated, and those who perpetrate such crimes will be held accountable. As we gather here today, let's remember the strengths that unite us. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Minister, for those comments. If I can elaborate just a minute on the Minister Stepanish's and Bodovet's comments. The official numbers that the government of Ukraine is able to record about all the war crimes, conflict-related sexual violence, the abduction of children, the forced deportations of civilian adults, these are only numbers that the government is able to verify. That doesn't mean that's the numbers that has happened. As someone who has done reporting on the abduction of children, I assure you it's tens of thousands more. And the same things, we do not know what is going on the territory of Russia with Ukrainians in connection with conflict-related sexual violence, nor do we know what's going on with the civilians who have been deported for labor. So please keep that in mind, that the numbers from the Ukrainian government are those that have been verified and not the ones that we actually know is happening. So when we are even reading about CRSV, one can't help but be horrified by the utter depravity of those who plan and commit such acts. Lyudmila Husseinova, who is with us here today, was snatched from her home in Russian-occupied Donetsk, became a Russian POW. For 3 years, she experienced personally such depravity. Now the president of SEMA Ukraine, SEMA, and SEMA is an international network of survivors of CRSV, but it is also, I learned, a word in Swahili that means speak out, meaning the victims must speak out so that everybody knows and understands what is happening to them. Ms. Husseinova and her organization prepared a video about the need to both publicize and punish depravity and bring to end to this wartime sexual violence, and also an end to the impunity with which it continues to be committed. Please allow me to forewarn everyone that this is a very difficult video to watch. Ms. Husseinova will be available later for questions.
Прощай, світ, прощай, світе, прощай, земле, неприязний краю, мої муки, мої люті, в хмари заховаю, в хмари заховаю. А ти моя Україно, безталанна вдова, я до тебе літатиму з хмари на розмову, з хмари на розмову тиху сумну, на раду з тобою, опівночі падатиму рясною росою, рясною
Earlier, when I spoke with Ms. Husseinova, she explained that this is an enactment of actual physical situations by actresses of what happens. So for example, the wrapping in plastic, the pregnant woman who is lying on broken boards on the cold cement floor. These are actually from victims' testimonies, situations that they have all been subjected to. As noted earlier, the depravity is profoundly incomprehensible, but shockingly, it is universal. Our next two guests, UN Undersecretary and Special Representative of the Secretary General on Sexual Violence and Conflict, Pramila Patton, and Elizabeth Taylor Jay, Vice Minister of Multicultural Affairs of Colombia and Chair of the International Alliance on the Prevention of Sexual Violence and Conflict Situations. Both in their respective roles confront CRSV on the international level. Let us begin with Pramila Patton and ask you to please give us your thoughts about specifically the UN framework of cooperation with Ukraine on preventing and responding to conflict-related sexual violence and similar goals and agreements within the UN.
Excellencies, friends, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for the invitation, and I really commend the World Federation of Ukrainian Women's Organization and the co-sponsors of this very important and timely event, and also the focus that you bring on global trends and patterns of CRSV with gender inequality and discrimination as some of its invisible drivers. We are facing very turbulent times as we see conflicts raging, coup erupting, human rights trampled. Well, thank you, Madam Moderator. I mean, anyone who wants to protest can take an appointment and come to my office, and I'm like open to have a discussion about the report, and I have been giving press conference and briefing to the Security Council, but I request that today we respect the Ukrainian women and all the Ukrainian victims as we enter the second year of this brutal war. And I think this is the opportunity for us. The Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs has spoken about the brutal and harrowing accounts of conflict-related sexual violence affecting women, men, and children. And we have seen the Commission of Inquiry reports. This gathering in the margins of CSW really provides us with an opportunity to take stock on how we are delivering on our solemn commitment to survivors, pursuant to the adoption of the framework of cooperation signed by the government of Ukraine and my office in May 2022, and its implementation plan, which contain dedicated pillars, including on justice and accountability, reparations, comprehensive services for survivors, security sector engagement, and trafficking in person for the purpose of sexual exploitation. As I address some of the support provided by my office in selected areas, justice and accountability, reparations, access to survivors, I must say that although we have achieved a lot in the last 2 years, much more remains to be done. In most settings, justice for crimes of CRSV is the rare exception rather than the rule. Challenges in investigating and prosecuting CRSV crimes are multiple, ranging from a lack of capacity to the lack of an explicit prosecutorial direction. And in this regard, the collaboration of my office through my team of experts on the rule of law and sexual violence in conflict with the Office of the Prosecutor General of Ukraine has been remarkable. Concrete steps have been taken to advance accountability, including the adoption of a strategy for victim and witness-centered approach to CRSV and the creation of a specialized CRSV unit within the Office of the Prosecutor General, which is receiving technical, financial, and operational support from my team. In March 2023, the team launched a capacity building series on strengthening victim-centered accountability for crimes of CRSV to address gaps in national expertise. And so far, I'm pleased to say that 75 investigators, prosecutors, and judges from 7 regions have benefited from such training. Additional workshops are currently being planned. Since October 2023, a senior international criminal law expert has been embedded in the CRSV specialized unit to enhance investigations and prosecution of cases and provide advice on methodology and substantive legal matters. A trauma counselor has also been recruited to support the unit's interaction with survivors. The team of experts is also providing technical support in the area of legal reform based on the model legislative provisions developed by my office. And I continue to impress on the national authorities the importance of aligning their legal framework with international standards and the critical importance of adopting a crime against humanity provision in their criminal code. Reparations is a key pillar of the implementation plan. My team is supporting the national authorities in designing a legal regime to deliver both interim and long-term reparation measures with draft laws currently pending before the Ukrainian parliament. In coordination with civil society organizations, the team of experts has also developed training materials on reparations for national prosecutors. For us, strengthening access to justice for victims must include the provision of reparations. And everywhere we see how reparation measures benefit survivors in relation to building public trust and confidence in the overall justice process. It is my sincere hope that the draft laws will be considered and adopted expeditiously and will lead to a solid reparation system. With regard to comprehensive services, this is the entry point for survivors to come forward and report. And I'm pleased to say, and I think my friend Pivy mentioned it, the project being implemented by 6 UN entities in collaboration with civil society organization is ongoing in Ukraine. I would like to conclude by underlining that the full realization of the commitments outlined in the framework will require longer-term, unwavering action and support. The collaboration of the Ukrainian authorities with my mandate and its efforts to tackle crimes of CRSV have been unwavering in the most difficult of circumstances. If these efforts are not supported by the international community, it will be very difficult to move forward. So I really urge the international community to continue to support Ukraine so that we can turn groundbreaking resolutions into judicial solutions on the ground. And this will take us one step closer to a world where no survivor of sexual violence is left behind during and in the wake of war. It will take us one step closer to replacing horror with healing and hope. Thank you.
Conflict-related sexual violence, needless to say, is a horribly emotional topic. That's why we have to stop it, period. It really ruins people's lives. Excuse me 1 second, but I will find my place. Vice Minister Jay, you're next. Please come forward. I apologize. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Greetings to Your Excellencies, the members of the panel, and ladies and gentlemen, good morning. As we gather here today, let us recognize the critical importance of our shared mission. Our objective is to shed light on the far-reaching security ramifications and profound implications of our collective failure to address sexual violence as a tool of war. We aim to acknowledge the gender inequality and discrimination lie at the heart of conflict-related sexual violence. From our experience, a country affected by more than 7 decades of armed conflict, where the intimacy and dignity of Colombians was blurred by different armed actors and many factions, sexual violence transcends all known limits. It became a weapon of war in territories, lives and bodies of women and LGBTQ+ individuals. The different conflict factions understood that this is a highly effective weapon. It goes unnoticed and at the same time managed to break the social fabric. This ruthless method uses the bodies of women and LGBTQ+ individuals as a site of conflict to tear apart very soul of communities. Sexual violence fractures society. It affects children, families, destroys homes, undermines environmental care and protection led by environmental leaders, damages community health and education, and put at risk food security and sovereignty. This is why we have assumed the leadership of the International Alliance on the Preventing Sexual Violence in Conflict Initiative, PSVI, as a pivotal commitment to global and total peace and justice. We strongly believe in the importance of empowering and supporting women's and feminist organizations and movements, both inside and outside our countries, as we have done in Colombia. Thanks to their peaceful resistance and collective defense of life and dignity, it is possible today to take the first steps toward a global peace, a peace without gender stereotypes and without abusive power relations. Therefore, we are here today with a clear and brave purpose to prevent and eliminate this injustice. We aim to galvanize a global commitment towards eradicating sexual violence as weapon of war, ensuring perpetrators are held accountable, and empower women and girls to assert their rights with strength and dignity. To achieve this, we need to start from a victim-centered approach that goes beyond rhetoric. We must create safe spaces where survivors can heal, rebuild their lives in order to restore the social fabric. That will be our first step as chair of the Alliance. Our goal is to clothe ourselves with their strength and create global awareness that can lead to more respectful and dignified societies where human rights and the rights of women and LGBTIQ+ communities are fully respected. We cannot allow sexual violence to continue undermining the peace we so deeply desire. Sexual violence is something that, more than as a state, as a society, we must not allow and use all our efforts to end it. As Jeanette Bedoya, survival of sexual violence during our internal conflict in Colombia would say, no es tiempo de callar. It's not time to be quiet. So let us embark on this journey together, united in our goal to create a world where justice prevails and all individuals, regardless of gender, can live free from the horrors of conflict-related sexual violence. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Vice Minister. I'm just going to take a little moment. When you said 70 years of conflict, that's 7 decades. Let's hope that does not happen anywhere else, especially not in Ukraine. We're going to now leave the international arena of representatives and move to the regional and national. With us today are from Ukraine, Dr. Katerina Levchenko, Government Commissioner for Gender Equality Policy in Ukraine and Deputy Head of Delegation from Ukraine to CSW 68, as well as Natalia Karbowska, Director of Strategic Development, Ukraine Women's Fund. Also joining us is Dr. Lara Scarpita, OSCE Senior Advisor on Gender Issues and Head of the Gender Issues Program in the Office of the Secretary General. The OSCE is the largest regional security organization in the world that has the issue of preventing CRSV as one of its mandates. We can ask you, Dr. Scarpita.
Excellencies, dear colleagues, first of all, really thank you to the organizers for putting a spotlight today on CRSV and the global security consequences that it carries. And I want to take this opportunity to really commend the Ukrainian government. We work very closely with Katerina Levchenko and her team for the bravery to really put gender equality as a priority in the work that they do, despite the difficulties that you're facing, and also to the bravery of the Ukrainian civil society. And many of them I see are our partners, are with us today. The many women-led organizations which operate on the ground, they're really at the front line of supporting the survivors of conflict-related sexual violence, as well as providing life-saving humanitarian assistance. We've heard today, and we see today that conflict-related sexual violence has become systematic in conflict. Somehow we often is seen as an inevitable part of the conflict warfare. But what we also see, and this is a crime that has truly appalling track record when it comes to accountability. And also we see in general from all the conflicts that survivors have huge difficulties in accessing justice for these crimes. For us, the OEC, as the world largest regional organizations fighting all forms of violence, including conflict-related sexual violence, is one of our top priorities. Now, in the context of these discussions, perhaps I would like to offer some thoughts about how we can, from our perspective, tackle this phenomenon. Of course, prevention, first of all, it's key. But now we are facing with the consequences of, especially in the context of Ukraine, of CRSV. And when we're looking at how to tackle this problem, I think the first thing that we need to do is we need to recognize that CRSV takes many, many forms. And the list of crimes, including under CRSV in international documents, is very long. And it's an appalling list. But each of these crimes needs really targeted measures to protect the survivors and to also prevent these crimes from happening. Secondly, it's important to understand that CRSV is deeply rooted in the gender inequalities that are worsened during conflict. And these inequalities continue if not tackled effectively. And a third aspect that we also have to consider when looking at CRSV is the fact that this is not the only forms of violence that happens during conflict. But in conflict, you have other forms of violence against women and girls. For example, increased in domestic violence, increased in harassment due to the militarization of the context. And all these forms of violence require targeted and long-term measures to mitigate the impact in the long term. And when I mean with long-term impact, long-term measures, I mean, first of all, measures to protect the survivors and their well-being, but also measures that address the scars and the trauma that is being, that CRSV leaves not only on the survivors, but also on the families and on entire communities. Because in many conflicts, we've seen that the consequences of SRSV, it's undermining, if not properly addressed, it's undermining and hampering peace, reconciliation, and social cohesion. So with targeted measures, and as already been mentioned, but what it is important from our experience is to put in place a safety net for the survivors. Survivor-centered approaches means creating a safety net for the survivors, which includes social protection, psychological support, economic opportunities for reintegration, access to justice, victims protection, victim protections to the highest standards, which also include avoiding and ensuring that the victims are not re-traumatized. A key component of this effort is, of course, accountability, and the OEC is working a lot with our participating states, and we're working very closely also with the Ukrainian authorities to enhance accountability through a number of initiatives that are really targeted to increase the capacity of the law enforcement agencies, of the security sector, of the legal system, of the judiciary, to effectively prevent, detect, and act upon CRSV in a way which is truly survivor-centered approach. And again, for us, accountability starts with supporting the survivors and our responsibility towards the survivors. And this means that the process that is put in place is focused first and foremost on their well-being. We have been working also extensively with civil society. Civil society is a key partner in addressing and alleviating and mitigating the impact of conflict-related sexual violence. And in particular, in the context of Ukraine, we have been supporting a number of grassroots organizations, bringing them together with the women of Bosnia and Herzegovina, which experience a long-term experience of dealing with the long-term consequences of conflict-related sexual violence. And at the same time, we also worked with, for example, the WAVE Network Europe to develop a dedicated toolkit for civil society to support them, a toolkit for civil society to support them to address how to best deal with the consequences of violence in the context of conflict. Now, if I may conclude with three recommendations based on our perspective, I think the first recommendation is that when discussing response to SRSV, there is a need to ensure that the assistance package addresses effectively all forms of violence in all its forms that it takes, and it continues to have a survivor-centered approach. Secondly, it's fundamental to ensure a strong partnership between international organizations or regional organizations, government authorities, and civil society. We don't have the luxury of operating in silos. These are problems that require long-term approaches, long-term solutions, and therefore collaborative efforts is needed. Of course, civil society plays a critical role, but not everything can be left to civil society. So the partnership is really, really important. It's also fundamental to ensure that the justice system is put in place to support the survivors. I always say that justice should wait for the survivors. It shouldn't be the survivors who runs after justice. This means that we have to wait, we have to put in place mechanisms that allows the survivors to access justice at his own pace, at his own time, even if this means 10, 15, 20, 25 years in some cases. It has happened. And finally, I think we also need to work to strengthen the code of conduct of the military, who have a key role in preventing conflict-related sexual violence. Again, thank you very much for this opportunity to be here. I would be very happy to answer questions if there are, but we look forward really to work in partnership with civil society and with the Ukrainian authorities. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Scarpita. And thank you for bringing up the point when we move from the international, which we do thank the Alliance actually for coming up with the code, the Murad code that is used now as the standard for dealing with victims of conflict-related sexual violence. But this also means that on the local, regional, local levels, law enforcement need to be trained how to gather the evidence, how to interview the victims. And as far as bringing it to justice, yes, that is, and we do not want to wait 25 years before the victims receive their justice. So that is an important, thank you for bringing that up. Our final two speakers are from Ukraine, and thank you for being so patient. And we're sorry that it didn't quite go as planned today, but I asked Dr. Levchenko to please come to the podium.
Yes, thank you, Irena, for giving me floor, and thank you very much to colleagues and sisters from Ukrainian World Federations of Women Organizations for organizing this event and to raise the voices of victims and survivors of conflict-related sexual violence from different regions of the world, from different countries, and of course, from my native Ukraine. And in our response to conflict-related sexual violence, we need not only to strengthen our own national capacity of our law enforcement bodies, social workers, non-governmental organizations, survivors networks, but as well, we need strong international support. And thank you for this support. All international organizations, UN system, Pramila's Patent Office, regional organizations like OSCE or Council of Europe and others. And continue to talk about framework program on cooperation between government of Ukraine and UN. I have to tell that this is really very effective tool for developing national policy and for cooperation with other countries and other organizations. And this May, it will be already the second anniversary of the signing this framework on cooperation. We managed to develop an implementation plan for this framework and also established interagency working group to coordinate activity. As a government commissioner, I am a chair of such working group. And what we do during implementation of this program, we pay attention to strong survivor-centered approach and strengthening accountability mechanisms for survivors. The second point, consultations with survivors. From the beginning of full-scale invasion and starting cooperation with different international actors, we were told about necessity to have meaningful and effective consultations with survivors and implement principle nothing about us without us. And it was not very easy from the beginning. If you do not have such experience, how you can organize such consultations? And due to cooperation with two famous and well-known international non-governmental organizations, Dr. Mukwege Foundation and Global Survival Fund, we started such process and developed the mechanism of such consultations. And today I can inform you that really we already have positive results of such cooperation and consultations. In February 2024, the mechanism held a series of focus groups to discuss with survivors the providing urgent interim reparation already mentioned by Olga Stefanishina. And all procedures were developed in strong cooperation with them. Ludmila Guseinova is a member of the board of the project on interim reparation. They also, their colleagues, their sisters are also members of Identification Commission and Commission on Appeal. And we will continue this to implement this approach, and we will continue to work closely with those who really need assistance. But on the other hand, those voices are so important in response to sexual violence. And the third, last but not least point, international cooperation. Madam Minister mentioned the Global Alliance to Prevent Sexual Violence in War, and I really can confirm that it is a unique platform for discussing ideas and initiatives and to promote the effective engagement of survivors in addressing and preventing conflict-related sexual violence. For Ukraine, participation in the Alliance is an opportunity to share experience in developing and implementing policies and mechanisms based on the needs and interests of survivors. And your Colombian experience is very important for us, especially if speak about implementing a reparations mechanism for victims of conflict-related sexual violence. And really, we want to know more and to learn more from your side, because so long, unfortunate conflict, like 70 years, and all like procedures and models which already elaborated in your country can be taken by Ukraine and other countries and organizations which want to support their citizens who suffered from this crime, from this atrocity. So this opportunity to talk during this event, really, it's a good chance to raise our voice and to stand together with those who need our assistance. Thank you very much for your strong support, for support of Pramila's Patent Office, for support of Office of UN Women and all UN organizations here. I cannot list everybody, for cooperation with Ukrainian diaspora and organizations throughout the world and here in UN. It's really big inspiration for us. We will continue our job, we will continue our activity, and I hope the justice for survivors will be found, and reparations as the first step for achieving the justice will be done to those who really need them. Thank you.
Thank you, Katya. I think actually, I'll go back to Vice Minister Jay with the 70 years. The whole topic of conflict-related sexual violence has existed for centuries. However, on an international level, and now in these various countries on local levels, we can probably safely say it's only been the last 4 decades that anybody's been paying attention to it as a policy issue. So we are grateful for that, but I think both Katerina and I were a little bit stunned by the 70 years, I'll be honest. So yes, the models that you have developed will probably be very useful for all of us. We have a guest here actually from the Alliance, Ambassador Archie Young. We have one more panelist that I'd like to speak, and then we'd like for you to come in for a word. Thank you. Natalia Karbowska is the Director of Strategic Development for Ukraine Women's Fund and actually works with NGOs on the ground. So Natalka, if you'd like to take a moment.
Дуже дякую. Thank you very much. I wanted to, as far as my organization, Ukrainian Women's Fund, works with NGOs, works on the ground. I wanted to talk about NGOs, about women's movements, and women's organizations in Ukraine are often among the first ones who survivors approach, because they are in the communities, they are on the ground, and they are there to provide help. Women's organizations, feminist organizations, they heal trauma. They work with the first respondents on the ground. They develop training programs for them and implement these trainings programs so that they help build the capacity of the first line respondents. They run hotlines. They work with the government to develop new policies and systems, and our colleagues from the government already spoke about this. Develop new legislation, and legislation on interim reparations, I think, is a perfect example of this joint work and effectiveness of the joint work of civil society and the government. They localize policies and make them work on the ground. But more importantly, women's organizations help survivors of conflict-related sexual violence to make their voice stronger, to make their voice heard. It is, I'm sure, you all will agree that it is critically important to make the voices of survivors heard at different levels. So the ways to do this, in our opinion, there are several of them. First of all, it is important, one of the most important ways is to support the organizations of survivors. And the organizations like SEMA, the survivor network that, SEMA Ukraine, the network of survivors that Lyudmila Uzienova represents. And I'm really proud that my organization, Ukrainian Women's Fund, is among those who are supporting SEMA Ukraine. We are providing them organizational support, so that the organization is able to, it has the administrative budget and, has the money to pay for the office and to the staff, to pay the staff. This is critically important. And I do encourage the other organizations to also to support, such small networks of survivors, because without our support, it will be really difficult for them to exist. This funding, very importantly, the funding for small organizations like Ludmila's one, small at the moment, I'm sure, they are getting stronger in terms of, capacities and advocacy. But this funding, it is very important that the funding for them should be flexible, should be long-term, and non-bureaucratic. Another important point that I wanted to make is the role of the Ukrainian feminist movement in being the voice of survivors of conflict-related sexual violence. There are many women's and feminist organizations in Ukraine which are already engaging in partnership with SEMA and also working with survivors of conflict-related sexual violence and becoming their voices. We also need to build the capacity of these organizations so that they know the topic better and they are more effective in representing the interests of the survivors of conflict-related sexual violence. There is something that I didn't really plan to talk about today, but I changed my mind just 10 minutes ago, and I do want to talk about the role of international feminist movement. As a feminist, as an activist, I decided that it is important for me to, to talk about this today. Coming to the event with a different agenda, interrupting the event will not help. For me, this only shows the lack of respect to your sisters. Is it real feminism? Is it real sisterhood? I don't think so. So is it real solidarity? I also don't think so. Will this make our international global feminist movement stronger? I also don't think so. I am still a big believer in the power of global feminist movement. And this is, well, one of the reasons why I joined the movement many years ago. So I do encourage our sisters from the other part of the world to show sisterhood, to show solidarity with us. And this will help all us to become stronger and become more, and, to achieve our goals, political advocacy, different ones. Only together we can become stronger. One more thing that I wanted to say is about survivor-centered approach, and this is something that colleagues already talked about. We need to hear more in developing the policies. We need to hear more the voices of conflict-related sexual violence survivors, and the process of consultations with them should be really open, transparent, and there should be a big willingness to listen and to hear. And I think we are really developing a good strategies on this in Ukraine, but definitely the more work needs to be done. About communication, I think it's important also that more people in Ukraine and at the international level to know and to hear about the situation with conflict-related sexual violence in Ukraine and in the other countries. And for this, I think we should use different vehicles, different methodologies. The video that we showed, that we saw at the beginning, the events like this, and other events and other kind of joint work is really, really important. And the last but not least, for me, conflict-related sexual violence is not only about survivors. It is not only about policies. It is about women, peace and security agenda globally and in a more holistic way. And it is about just recovery, justice that should prevail in us winning the peace in Ukraine and also in Ukraine recovering from the war. So I do think that the voices of conflict-related sexual violence survivors should be included already in the initiatives on recovery of Ukraine. In my opinion, this is very important. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Natalka. We are just about 10 minutes away, so what I'd like to do, there's two things. One, I'd like to ask Ambassador Young to make a comment, but also Lyudmila Husseinova, a Russian POW, is here. And Lyudmila, якщо ти хочеш тепер говорити, я буду тебе перекладати. We're going to ask Lyudmila for a word, and I'll be translating.
Ви сьогодні побачили відео і побачили ті страждання, через котрі проходять жінки, котрі були в полоні і котрі зараз залишаються в полоні.
Today you saw a video of these women who have suffered in prison, and many of them still remain in Russian prisons.
Це відео зроблено на основі справжніх історій, котрі пережили мої колежанки, панума сестри. Там є моя історія особиста також.
Depicted in this video are genuine stories of my friends, of people I know, as well depicted in this video is my personal story.
Мені випало бути сьогодні голосом тих жінок, котрі зараз в полоні.
Today we are all, and I need to be the voice of all of those women who are currently in prison.
І я хочу, щоб мій голос не був деструктивним, не був таким, як ми сьогодні бачили.
And I fervently hope that this voice is not destructive like we saw today.
Я хочу, щоб мій голос приніс мир нашій Україні, свободу нашим громадянам.
I really want that my voice brings peace to my country and freedom to my people.
Але я знаю, що без вашої підтримки, без ваших посилюючих голосів у нас нічого не вийде.
And I realize that without your support, without your strong voices, none of this will come to be.
Я прошу вас бути нашими голосами. Я прошу вас бути голосами тих, котрі вже ніколи в житті нічого не скажуть. Я прошу вас підтримувати нашу країну, наших громадян. І пам'ятати, що без допомоги вас всіх, без допомоги світу ми не переможемо. Я прошу вас.
And I ask you to please support us, to please understand without your voices, we will not be able to do this. I'm not sure I caught all of that, but I'm asking you to support Ukraine for the freedom of our country and to speak loudly on behalf of those who are currently imprisoned.
Я впевнена, у нас все вийде. Рік тому я говорила про Тетяну, рік тому я говорила про Олю Мазалєвську, рік тому я говорила про Олю Мілещенка, рік тому я говорила про і просила допомоги визволення інших людей. Вони сьогодні на свободі.
A year ago, I was here and I asked for your help in the freeing of several women, and they were named. And I want you all to know that all of these women are currently living in freedom.
І тому сьогодні я продовжую говорити про тих, хто досі в полоні. Ви побачите ще на зустрічах. Я просила багатьох з вас розповсюджувати цю інформацію, ці фотографії і імена цих жінок будь-яким засобом, в своїх соцмережах, серед своїх друзів. Передавайте, бо це допоможе нам. Я в цьому впевнена.
And this year, I also brought names of women who remain imprisoned. Many of you have been at events where you have seen their photos and their names on displays and may attend other events where you will see them. I ask you again to please remember them and support them because truly your support helps them become free.
І серед тих, хто в полоні, є справжні героїні.
Among those who are in prison are genuine heroines.
Є жінки, котрі разом зі мною у 22-му році просто в в'язниці відмовилися голосувати про приєднання під час так званого референдуму про приєднання окупованих територій до території Росії.
There are women who were imprisoned simply for refusing to vote during the so-called referendum of uniting the occupied territories with Russia.
Серед них є зараз, це точна інформація, 2 жінки, котрі відмовилися в в'язниці, просто примушують отримувати російські паспорти, але 2 жінки, вони відмовилися це робити.
Currently, there are 2 women who are imprisoned who were being forced to accept Russian passports and to change their passports. They refused. That said, nonetheless, it was they were forced to do so.
Я обов'язково вас з ними познайомлю через рік. Я впевнена, через рік вони будуть тут стояти, ви будете їх бачити, будете обіймати так, як обіймаєте зараз мене. Ми переможемо. Слава Україні!
Героям слава. And I am convinced that those same 2 women, with your help, they will be standing here with me next year, and they will be free, and that just like you are hugging me, you will be hugging them. Slava Ukraini.
Дякую.
Thank you, Ludmila. Ambassador Young, please. Archie Young is the ambassador to the General Assembly from the United Kingdom, and also is a member of the alliance to which Vice Minister Jay was speaking about earlier. Please.
Thank you very much, and good morning, and thank you very much for organizing this event, and thank you in particular to all of our speakers for shining a spotlight, for speaking out, and for raising the awareness of these terrible crimes in Ukraine and all around the world. I'm very conscious that I am the first man to speak this morning, and I think that's absolutely right. This should be a conversation which is led by women, led by formidable female leaders. But I also hope it's right that men speak out as well as allies and supporters, so that you all know that there is half the world's population which is standing with you and supporting you in these efforts. The Deputy Prime Minister, Stefanisheva, she called for international solidarity. So if I can, I wanted to, at least on behalf of the UK, really strongly express that solidarity in the face of Russia's illegal and full-scale invasion of Ukraine. And also briefly just highlight a couple of ways in which I think that solidarity is being manifested. So the first is through our partnership, as Minister Jay said, and others, with the International Alliance on Preventing Sexual Violence in Conflict, which is, I think, a really important global initiative to take forward the actions that are taking place, but also to provide that focal point for these voices and that determination. But also some of the practical support, providing support in Ukraine for increasing the capacity for investigation of war crimes. Also providing support in Ukraine for gender-based violence survivors. All of these are part of that much broader international effort to show support to Ukraine, to show support to victims of CRSV all over the world. And I'll just finish on that point, which is, as has been mentioned today, impunity for CRSV is sadly still all too common. And we stand here in solidarity, not just to support victims and to hear the incredible testimonies from Ludmila. We cannot stand here and listen to these testimonies and not be moved and stirred to action, but also to make sure that we call for justice and accountability wherever these crimes take place. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ambassador. And yes, we do know that the other half of the population supports us, and we're grateful for that as well. We literally have 5 minutes left, so we're going to go to Q&A, but before we go to the audience Q&A, let me ask among the panelists, are there any panelists who want to follow up on comments made by speakers or add to their comments as follow-up before we go? Okay, Okay, we're going to go straight to the questions. If you have a question, we have a few minutes. I'm going to probably take 2. And please tell us we have the microphone here. Please tell us your name and the organization, if you are with an organization who you are representing. Do we have any questions or comments?
My name is Valerie from France. I would like to know more about the code of conduct for military. It really surprises me because we can think that they have orders from hierarchy. So what would it change? Could you tell more about that?
I don't know to who that question, who are you addressing? Delara, go ahead. Okay.
Let's take one more, maybe.
Okay, do we have another question? Yes. Sophia Farion, yes.
Thank you. Good morning. Yes, Sophia Farion. I am here representing the Global Network of Women Peace Builders, which is a global coalition of over 120 women and youth grassroots organizations from all over the world. I'm very honored as a Ukrainian American to be leading our work in Ukraine and in the region. So something that we heard about, and Pani Karaboska mentioned this earlier, of the role of local civil society and women's civil society in particular. They are the first ones often that have the trust for survivors to come to and share their stories. However, there is often a twofold gap between those stories actually moving up into the systems that can provide justice. One, from the fact that survivors are often just not comfortable coming forward, and by no means do they have the need to come forward, or that's not a survivor-centered approach. But secondhand, sometimes the systems from the oblast level or national governments don't reach local civil society on the ground to connect these organizations to the systems that can refer the survivors who do want to have justice. And so I know the Ukrainian government has been doing a lot of effort in this outreach to local civil society, but I'm wondering if there's just a little more understanding of what continued efforts are happening to make sure that local to oblast or national referral mechanisms are happening. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you. Just very shortly about effective tool on cooperation with civil society and especially at local level. So, of course, Natalka can also tell about this tool, but from my side, on behalf of government institutions of Ukraine, I have to tell that creation of coalition on certain 25, so-called oblast regional coalitions for implementing women, peace and security agenda really gives us opportunity to cooperate and communicate very wide very wide spectrum of women and civil society organizations who support survivors of sexual violence, work in the areas of promoting gender equality, prevent gender-based violence, work with veterans, with IDPs, etc., etc. So coalition certain 25, we have at the moment at 19 regions of Ukraine, and we expect that in cooperation with the Ukrainian Women Fund and other non-governmental organizations, till the end of this year, we will have such coalitions in every region of Ukraine, including Crimea. We started to work with the Ukrainian authorities for Crimea because we also want to be prepared for liberation of this peninsula.
Thank you. The question to Dr. Scarpita. I'm sorry, can you please tell us your name again and the organization you represent or with? No? Okay. Not, but can you, I'm sorry, because we didn't quite hear it. Can you repeat that question? Okay.
Yeah, I mean,
Okay.
you know, do you see we are working? Okay, what I was referring to, that you see, we are working very closely with all the participating states, including the military, in order to ensure full awareness of IHL, but not just IHL, is gender perspectives, and in particular, what I was referring to is training, capacity building, and awareness raising within the military. at all levels about conflict-related sexual violence, about the consequences of conflict-related sexual violence. Also because the military is very often in conflict settings, in general, they're the first responders. So it's very important that also military personnel or civilian personnel, which is attached to military personnel, is aware of CRSV, and therefore is able also to provide the support is needed. This is what I was referring to.
Thank you, Dr. Scarpita. We really have come exactly to the end of our time. On behalf of the World Federation of Ukrainian Women's Organizations, to all our partners and sponsors, I thank all of you who have come here, all of you who have joined us virtually. A recording of this event will be available on our World Federation YouTube page, and registrants with an email will receive that notice. I'm going to ask if everybody could let the panelists exit first. If you'd like to get up, because I know many of you have to be in additional places, and then we'll, after that, we'll exit. Please take the handouts with you. They're for you. And once again, thank you for coming here, being with us. We appreciate your support.